Greetings. Today we will begin looking at criminal justice in America. The first thing we are going to do is respond to the following quote from Aristotle. The law is reason, free from passion. Check on Schoology for the discussion board called Demonstrating Rule of Law. In that discussion board, you're going to explain in your own words what you think this quote means. Please pause this video at this time to respond to the discussion board regarding this quote from Aristotle and press play when you are finished. There are two types of cases that enter into a courtroom. The first of which are criminal cases. A criminal case is when a complaint is brought by the government against the defendant. In other words, the federal government or the state or the local government will accuse a person or persons or a group of people of committing a specific crime. Usually in criminal cases we see things like murder or theft, just as some examples. The punishments for criminal cases are severe. They include fines, jail, or prison time, which they are different and we will get into in a later date. And in some states where it's permissible, execution. Now, the defendant is indicted or accused of a crime, and then they become arrested. If they are convicted, which means that they are found guilty, then they will have to face one of these types of punishments. The other type of case that we'll see are civil cases. A civil case is when a complaint is brought by a plaintiff against the defendant. A plaintiff is a private person or sometimes private organization that has been wronged by another individual. In this case, the punishments or sentencing can include fines, money owed, or a change in family and home. So for instance, this is where we would see car accidents or family court issues with custody of children. What exactly is law? Jurisprudence. Jurisprudence is the field of study devoted to studying law and legal philosophy, just like biology is the study of living organisms. Jurisprudence is the study of law. There's one very important rule that we deal with when we look at law, and it's called the rule of law. And it states that democracy cannot function effectively unless its laws are respected by those who are intended to follow them. In other words, the rules are meant to be followed. And that's the way our government functions and society functions. Now, one thing there is to note is that most cases don't ever see inside of the courtroom. Approximately 95 to 98% of cases will be settled outside of the courtroom. But law is still fun to study. The next thing you're going to do is problem 1, demonstrating rule of law. Look for this activity on Schoology. Using the class activity demonstrating rule of law graphic organizer, you're going to list 10 daily activities such as waking up, eating, driving, etc. Next to each item, list any of the laws that affect that particular activity. Think about what's the purpose of the law you identified. Would you change any of these laws? And why or why not? Go ahead and pause this video at the time to complete the top of that graphic organizer. When you're done, press play. Now that you've finished demonstrating the rule of law, the next thing you're going to do is take a look at problem 1.2, the case of the shipwrecked sailors. There are questions to answer on Schoology. Afterwards, go back to the graphic organizer on demonstrating rule of law to create arguments for or against the guilt of these two sailors. Do not move on to the next slide of this PowerPoint until you have finished the activity. Pause this video at this time to complete the shipwrecked sailors and then the bottom half of the demonstrating rule of law graphic organizer. Great! Now that you've completed the case of the shipwrecked sailors and the bottom portion of your demonstrating rule of law graphic organizer, let's take a look at the case. The name of the case was Regina versus Dudley and Stevens in 1884. Dudley and Stevens being the two survivors of the shipwrecked ship. When they reached back to England, they were both found guilty of murder and then sentenced to death. Please ignore the typo on the screen. The court stated, "We are often forced to set up standards we cannot reach ourselves, and to lay down rules which we could not ourselves satisfy. But a man has no right to declare temptation as an excuse to allow compassion for the criminal to change or weaken the legal definition of the crime." In other words, if you kill someone, that's still murder, even in these extenuating circumstances. That's what the court meant. But just 6 months after this verdict was given, Queen Victoria, who was sitting on the throne in England at the time, commuted the sentence from death to just 6 months imprisonment. Why do you think she did this? Go ahead and reflect on that. This concludes the demonstrating rule of law portion of this activity. I hope this got your brains thinking about what it means to study law. I look forward to our next lesson together. Have a great day.